Raise your hand if you need a graphing calculator, Liz and Jamie. Okay. The problems that you see on the board, please get started on those two questions. If you have your answers already, just check with your graphing calculator just to make sure that whatever that you're doing is correct. Yes. Yep. It's because, okay, first of all, check your mode. It's got to be in radians mode. And then you got to convert your windows then. So could you just go to your windows and check to see if your X max and X min are the following? And Y max, make this to be 1. Yep. Yes.
Can you say again how to convert it to radians?
Go to mode, which is so do you see where the second button? So are you on mode?
Yeah.
It's the fourth one that you see. Yep. Your highlights should be in on the radians. Because you move it to the left, not to the right. That's the just you have your or you just make sure you label the X right. Okay. So do you understand the pi over 4 graph transformation? What we have to do? The pi over 4. Oh, by the way, don't do this. We're graphing up here. I'm typing the equation up here and we'll just practice that. Yeah, so first of all, if you're doing that, you start that. Don't draw the line until you have 5 points. Because you're going up and you're coming down, you don't know you're kind of like stuck in it, right? Okay. If that's the case, then I need to see clearly like where these points are. So at 3, 5, or 4, that's correct. And then for the 7, 5, or 4, there you go. Okay. Well, that means that you flip it over. So so that pi over 4 means you move it to the right, right? That's where you start. And because it's a sine, it's got to be in the middle. Yeah. So you didn't have a homework from me over the weekend, particularly because I feel like we just need to do a little bit more practice before some of the questions I just wanted to throw out there. Last week, I have just gave you a lot of notes. There wasn't enough time for us to really practice. So that's what I want to do. I cannot really talk to you guys about period because now on top of everything that you see, this is, if you take a look at number 6 and if you're like struggling with how to do 6, which is fine at this point because we're still in the process of learning this whole thing. That's just one simple transformation. Now I can put an amplitude like number 8 along with horizontal shift. And then, or I could just add something else after that. That's that's combining all 3 transformations into one, right? Vertical shift, horizontal shift, as well as amplitude. All of that. And then on top of that, I'm going to add the frequency. We cannot really do that unless our pretty much the base of how to do all the basic transformations is pretty solid. Okay. All right. So I didn't give you guys any grid for this, and so it's kind of gives me also an idea as to how to show you guys what to do whenever you guys are going to be faced with non-graphing paper questions like this, because you can adjust your axis to whatever you want, and sometimes you do need that if the amplitude is way up high or way down low. The only thing I really worry about is that some of you guys might really not have a good habit of drawing these values out. I need to see this for basic for at least for today and tomorrow. Draw the grid in such a way that I will always be able to see pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. Okay, I just need you to practice that. The reason for this is because those 5 values, okay, that we have all practiced with, I labeled it as 2 pi over 2, 4 pi over 2, but you guys all know that's pi and 2 pi. That's where the max, mid, min values come into play. You keep on alternating amongst those values. That's why we really want to focus on how those values really change, because all the other values like the 30 degrees, 60, 45, they're all part of it. It's just that we don't want to think about all those decimal values too. 0, 1, 0, negative ones are easier to deal with. So for the very first one, okay, I'm going to just help you guys out with how to do this. First of all, everyone should just know how to do that, okay? You guys just need to copy and paste that and just get a habit of how to draw these things by hand. The next thing is, usually there's one transformation, the transformation that you always want to focus on if you're given that, the amplitude and the vertical shift. You always take care of that first, which we call the framework, right? So here, let's just take care of that. Technically speaking, this is 0, amplitude is still 1. I know that some of you guys didn't do this because you guys already knew. If I were to still draw it though, I would draw the midline along the x-axis, and then let's call this down here that's -1, and let's call this here that's a +1. Okay, so I kind of zone in into which kind of space that I'm going to be dealing with here. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a look at, okay, so we all must understand that's just moving right by pi over 4. So at pi over 4, which is half increment of pi over 2, which is right here, that is where I'm going to start. Sine, this is also something that you need to all memorize, is that mid, max, mid, minimum, and then mid. That's what these values are for. You start from the middle, go up to maximum, go to middle, go to minimum, and back to mid. So we're going to keep on alternating that, but by how much increment? Every pi over 2 is when those things happen, because if you take a look, I add pi over 2 and I get to this. I add pi over 2 and I get to that. And every pi over 2 are 2 increments from where I start. So 1, 2, that's where the maximum is going to occur. 1, 2, minimum. 1, 2, middle. And this is minimum. And then 1, 2. So it's going to go a little bit above 2 pi. That's going back to the middle line, as we say. That value here is going to be, if we're dividing it by pi over 4s here, that's going to be 9 pi over 4 here. Okay.
And then you will just draw the line like this. I know it's not perfect, but for me to see that for every one of these values, okay? Well, I didn't really have to draw that, but for every one of these values, it falls under the correct x-axis. That's what I'm really focused on, okay? And as long as you have those 5 points, you can just keep on repeating the process. Move left 2. That's where my first point would be. Again, another 2. Mid, another 2. Max, another 2. And then you get the idea. You can just connect like this. All right, moving on for number 8, -2 sine x minus pi here. Kevin, can you tell me what the graph transformation here would be?
Okay, so you move right by pi.
Yep.
That's your starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a stretch by 2, so your like boundary is going to be +2 and -2.
Excellent. Give me 1 second. So up 2, down 2. And I'm just going to establish my framework here. That's the highest. That's the lowest. And obviously the middle line is on the x-axis. Okay, great.
But because it's negative, it flips. So usually it would go max, but then now it goes mid. So 3 pi over 4 would be the mid value.
3 pi over 2.
That's what I meant.
3 pi over 2, I would go to minimum. And at pi over 2, it goes. So this is where you start, but then the wave would look like this. Okay, the wave should look like that because from middle, it goes to minimum, like Kevin said. But if I keep on repeating the process on the other side, that will go down to this one, go down to 2, and then go down to here, like this. So even if you just move it by, like, I guess for right by pi, this is the wave that you're supposed to get, but then that wave keeps on repeating itself over and over again. So at here, it's going to be up this, and then at -2 pi, it's going to be like that. In other words, this kind of looks like regular sine wave, okay? But it's because it's -2 sine of x, and then you have to subtract pi, even though it's pretty much going to be the same wave, you move it right by pi, and now from the origin, it kind of creates a regular sine wave. So they actually have something to do with the properties there. So that's just an FYI here. If it's negative sine of, let's say, x minus pi, that's the same thing as saying sine of x. We can kind of see that as well here. But again, all we're really just kind of focusing on is establishing all the graph transformations, making the correct grid, and seeing that every 2 increments, you are moving back and forth from max, middle, and min. That increment of being 2, that's going to change if we implement the period in there. And that is going to be a lot more hectic to deal with. I want you guys to at least understand what you guys see on the board up here. Are we all good with this one? Danny, let me know when you copy this one here, okay?
Oh, yeah,
yep. Okay, so let's see. Let's try these 2 again. So like I said, we're going to be constantly tackling on sine and cosine waves. No tangents for today, just sine and cosine waves as much as possible. Now, I am putting on the transformations for the vertical shift as well. And now this one, it contains everything. Okay, now the vertical shift, amplitude, and the horizontal shift coming into play. What do we do in those types of situations? Again, first, please label everything here. And for those of you that can sketch these pretty quickly, so check your answers with the graphing calculator once you're done.
Middle line will move. That's right. That's right. Yeah. So then you start at the middle. Because now because it's negative sign, the next point which every pi over two you move, right? So here, the next do I go max or min? I max or min, because obviously you need to go one way or the other. But it's right. Keep on. No, 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 no. So here, then we're going to do you see that happen? All you gotta do is now plot the points, connect the dots. Yes. The transformation that this moves to the right. And also I have one question. You know how you start like that? So that you do sign is the middle, minimum, middle. So here at negative 5 over 2, you would plot the middle, right? So let's say you plot this. I mean, or one, middle. There you go. The next one, which is here, you go down to minimum. No, not there, because we're moving this way. Next one's like zero. There you go. Now you go get this, that, and then that, yeah, like that. This is the first one. This is how we do it. Kind of get it, or is it still kind of get it? Is this the first one? So here you started from moving left by pi over 2, but then you didn't apply the vertical shift. So the first thing that I always ask you to do is establish a framework here. So if the vertical shift, you gotta pick that and you move it by 1. Okay? And then if it's a negative sign, you start from middle, then you have to start going down right after that. Okay? Could you actually retry that or just redraw it down here? Just one more time. Great. Excellent job. Well, always start with string. That's right. So which means that 1, you draw the middle. Remember how I always establish the max, middle, and minimum line? That's what I need to do. So let me take it. You draw all these dashed lines here. So this is at 1. So you draw like these dashed lines. Because like you told me that this vertical shift, right? There we go. So we compare that. Great. Okay, what's the amplitude? Well, it's just 1. Whereas a negative means that it's reflected. So if it's 1, you go up and down by 1. So you draw this dot line up here, and line down here. Now you have this little like space in which you're going to be drawing a bunch of waves. That's your max, that's your middle, and that's your min. Are we so far okay? Okay. Now you got to take care of this. See, we took care of 2 stuff, now like 2. Now this is the last one to deal with. What is this plus pi over 2 going to do in terms of graph transformation? So that's where you're going to start. Remember, for sine, okay, I think you drew it here. I gave you this table for a reason. Sine goes from 0, 1, 0, negative 1, 0. But negative sign, negative sign goes from 0, negative 1, 0, 1, 0. The zeros are always middle. And negative 1 will be called maximum. Oh, min and 1 will be. So this is a pattern that you're always going to move by. So you move left by negative pi over 2. So this is where you start, okay? You start at min. Then you move right increment by every pi over 2, so which will be at 0. So if you move from negative pi over 2 by pi over 2, you go back up to 0, right? At 0, which is next on the list, you go to maximum. So you plot right there. The next one on the list, where do you go? Plot. Then at pi, where do I go? There you go. Keep going. Uh-huh. Then connect those dots for me. It doesn't look symmetrical, but that's okay. Because your point I know is correct. That's what I'm saying. Okay? You get a little bit of just don't put the gas. Keep on alternating.
Yeah, because it was like 3 times.
Okay. So, like I said, pi over 2 is a magic number in which you guys are just going to keep on moving right or left by. I have some of you guys have already finished here, so I'm going to ask you for the transformations. Nora, what's the transformations that you have for the first one? Reflected over the x-axis. Great. And then what's the plus 1 going to do? Move it up 1. Now, another thing that I want to ask you is, Nora, this is negative sign, which means what are the 5 patterns like alternating between max, mid, and min? How do we write that? Perfect. So I know it's kind of hard to see, but you start from middle. Sine waves always start from the middle. Then you go down to minimum, back to middle. Then you go all the way up to maximum, back to middle. So here's now everything's been laid out. Actually, no, I didn't even get a chance to do the framework. So all of you guys, just draw the grid and just get stuck there. You gotta understand that the first thing that you do for any trig graphs that I'm giving you, you gotta draw this. If some of you guys don't even need to draw and sketch it, be my guest, but it's really helpful if you have that. I start at 1 because that's what it tells me. The amplitude here is implied that there's 1 in there, so I move up 1 and down 1. So this is 2 and 0. Okay, I have that laid out. I have the foundations. All I gotta do is just now plot the points and connect the dots. I move left by pi over 2, like Nora said. So I know that here, that's where I'm going to start from. And the starting point is going to be at middle. So I'm going to do it right here. That's where the starting point is going to be. Then the next one up on the list is moving right. Every pi over 2 increments, that's where those points are going to happen. Max, middle, min, or whatever. So the next one up on the list is 0. And the next one up on the list here, we're going to go to minimum. So we're going to go down here. Pi over 2, we're going to go back up to minimal. And then everything after that is pretty much kind of self-explanatory because, you know, it's just going to keep on alternating back and forth and back and forth. So this is the wave that you're supposed to get. Okay? And you can check with your graphing calculator, and then obviously you're going to get the same thing. Set your boundaries to 2 pi, negative 2 pi. You can set this to be 0 and 2. The framework and the grid from negative 2 pi to 2 pi, that should always be your windows. If you get the exact same thing, you got it. All right, next one, 11. We have 3 sine x plus pi minus 2. Abby, what's the transformations here? Amplitude of 3. Down 2. Okay, great. I have 3 things all combined into 1. So again, the first thing I do is always establish the framework. I go down 2. So I draw a dashed line here indicating that that's my midline. Then I have to go up 3, which is now I'm going to be at positive 1 now. Then I go down 3, which is all the way down here. So that's going to be a negative 5. This is a negative 2. So you can see that go up 3 and down 3, we can get those values. Okay, that's done. Now I know that the starting point is going to be at left pi, which is negative pi. So I start at the middle. Abby, for sine, just the positive sign, I start at mid, and what's the last 4 again? That's right. So then I go up to maximum for my second point after my starting point, which is at negative pi over 2. So at negative pi over 2, I know it's going to reach all the way up to the maximum. Then at 0, it's going to be back to middle, pi over 2, and then at pi. Look, this is one full cycle, okay? One uphill and one downhill. No matter where you are, this will take place in the span of 2 pi. Because remember, we talked about how that's always one cycle. every other point that comes after that, okay, is just the repeated steps of what we have been doing. So that is the wave that you're supposed to get. It keeps on alternating back and forth. Danny, let me know if you got the 11, okay?
Yeah.
Good, okay. All right, so since we have talked about sine, and it's really important for me at least at this point that not only do you guys know transformations, because a lot of us are kind of okay, we talked about it before, but the new stuff to memorize is really just this on the top, that negative sine is middle. Well, every sine wave starts at the middle, but the negative goes to minimum, and then everything just keeps on going back and forth. But the positive sign, we start at middle, and then we go up to maximum. And then we just repeat itself over and over and over again. That is like the new step, if you will, that you need to memorize. Now, we're going to talk about cosines in the next 2 slides, and I think we have a couple more problems to do, and that's going to be it. Today, you definitely have homework. I just wanted to get this out and make sure everyone's going to be okay. Now, let's talk about these two. So start off with just a semi-easy questions with no amplitude. They're all just going to be ones. Okay, again, we're doing the exact same thing. I know you're probably going to get sick and tired of drawing this graph over and over again, but I have some bad news. We're going to have to do this a lot. Okay, so get comfortable with it. That's my only suggestion here. It's cosine, right? The cosine starts always. Let's take a look at this. When x is 0, pi over 2, pi 3, pi over 2, pi. It starts with max. You see that? So therefore that point has to be. Yep. You move it right by pi over 4 and plot it at middle way. This is because we're talking about cosine, we're no longer talking about sine. The cosine wave, if you see from before, cosine wave always starts from the maximum values, then goes to middle. So their routines change. So actually at pi over 4, that's where the maximum is supposed to occur. So we just have to understand that what trig function is given, and then from that we can kind of determine where we start from, max, middle.
I went a little too fast. I forgot the pi over 4. But I know it's just gonna be shifted like here and then here.
Because you were saying that this is before the transformation.
Yeah, I forgot.
It's right here.
Yeah, and then it would be here, and then it would be like down there, and it would be here.
It would still be here, but it would be just moved.
Yeah, and then it would be here.
And this one is okay, right? We started in the middle again. So at pi, when you move right by pi, which is you starting right here. And one thing I don't really understand also is why did you move it down by 2 when this is a minus 1? Because it's down 2. So then your framework should be down, like the middle work should be here, the middle line, and then the max and min should be these two. With the amplitude is just 1, okay? So that's one thing. No, I'm talking about drawing the middle line. The middle line should be a -1, right? But you drew it at -2.
Yeah.
It seems like your middle line is a negative.
Yeah, because I think I started instead of starting my point at the max, I started at the min. So you see how I threw everything off, and it should.
Oh, okay. So you're saying this was your minimum,
Yeah.
which is correct. Yes, that is correct.
I shouldn't have started from the min. I'm gonna start from the max.
You do have to start from the min because it's now negative cosine compared to positive cosine. But this one you start from the minimum, and then you go back up to middle, and then you go back up to middle. Draw with your graphing calculator, or if you want to retract.
Wait, but if it's negative, don't you go
Minimum.
It kind of makes more sense than that.
Minimum, middle, max, middle, minimum. That's how it's supposed to go because it's negative, so everything's flipped over. If you say cosine, you start from max. Now negative cosine means you gotta start from minimum because it's flipped over.
So you go from minimum and then it goes min, max.
That's right.
So you start at minimum.
That's right for negative cosine. For sine, it doesn't matter because you always start in middle, right?
Yeah.
Because it's 0 times negative, it's still 0.
Yeah.
But for cosine, everything flips over. Well, for this one, it's great. I like this. The only problem here is that you moved it right by color forward, I can see that. But you started at the middle. Assuming that this is top. So you kind of have to like shift like a little bit to the right. Oh, that's it. Yeah, okay, so right by color for everything. Andrew, how are we doing here? This one right here. Pi over 4, yeah, pi over 4. And but if it was pi over 2, this would be correct. Because I got to think about it. I'm assuming that this falls under halfway. Okay, so just label it for me. A little bit easier to see. Just what I'm gonna ask you to do is just make a little label between those guys, and then this is the last one. Seems like you did not move everything down by the beginning. So, it seems like your middle line is 0, but your midline should be a negative. You gotta shift everything down by. Because everything else is correct except you didn't move it down by.
No,
Okay.
because this was where this is where I started. And then-
Okay, but if it's down 1, okay. Remember the first thing I would ask down 2, right? Because we gotta start at minimum. But this is plus 2, right? Is this correct with this one? Is this correct? If you start at plus 2, is this plus 2 in the middle? Or is this 1? I'm not sure what this sequence means. It's 2. It's whatever this is. Guys, it's right now, I should see a lot of students struggle, and that is perfect, okay? Because the reason I say that is because we're all in the process of learning this thing. Last week, I threw a lot of stuff on the table. So for those of you that are kind of like get this, which I do see that you guys are really just getting it, I'm really, really glad that this comes out really easy for you. And when I do periods and frequencies, it's not going to create too much of a difficulty. Now, for those of you that is still kind of struggling with this, is for cosine, now everything kind of changed. So I've seen some common mistakes with cosines, and that's okay. Because sine and cosine, well, technically speaking, cosine waves with positive and negative cosine, they start at max, or they start at minimum. For sine, they always start at minimum. So it's kind of easier to memorize that way. Okay. So again, regardless of what type of graph that you're going to be faced with, you're always going to do this first, no matter what type of graph it is. Let's first talk about, though, what cosine and negative cosine does, like in terms of alternating its values. Tony, what are the values, like the max, min, stuff like that, for positive cosine here? So we start at max, right? Then where do we go? Obviously, the only place to go is down, and then it keeps on alternating. What about negative cosine? We start at let's say the other word. What negative cosine starts at where? Minimum. And then it goes to middle, right? Okay. I heard you say max, so that's why. Okay. Anyways, and then after that, everything else just keeps on alternating back and forth. So this is the patterns, and look at how they start at both locations. So it gets confusing. For sine, doesn't matter what sign it is, like in front of it, it's just gonna plain old start at always at the middle line. So I draw the lines here. Forget about where you need to start from. I have to go up to and then draw this dashed line here, indicating that this is the middle line. The amplitude here is 1. So the lowest it's going to go down to is positive 1. Remember, because that's what the amplitude was. Positive 1 up there is going to be a positive 3. So that's my max and that's my minimum. You got to have that. Okay, so because it gets so easy to lose track of where you are, what to do, where my points are going to be. Draw the lines out. Okay, I know it's going to be annoying, but just draw them out. And then pi over 4 to the, Tony, what's the transformation? To the right. Okay, I'm not going to repeat that again. We should all know that whatever is inside the parentheses is in the opposite direction. So I start at pi over 4. So I draw the little increments halfway between just to indicate that they're pi over 4s. So I start at here, right? That's not true, right? Because sometimes it's kind of easy for us to kind of lose track of where we were. And that's the common mistake. So what I saw. It's at max. There we go. So now we got to draw it here. So it looks a little weird, but that's where it needs to be. And in the next blue increment, I'm going to go down to obviously middle, minimum, middle, and then I can just kind of highlight the blue ones here. And then that's middle, minimum, middle, max. And then I'm just going to plot everything like this. And then that's the cosine wave shifted right by pi over 4. Okay. The next one, negative cosine x minus pi minus 1. For this one, the three transformations that you see, Amelia, could you please tell me what they are? Right by pi, great. And then down 1. And what is this negative going to do? Reflect. But we already know the values. Like, we don't really care about the negative sign. All we care about is that it starts at minimum. So again, the first thing is always to draw the framework here. -1, +1, -1 from the amplitude. So I'm going to go down to -2, and I'm going to go up to 0 for my max and min. And the -1 is going to be at my middle. Again, that's my framework here. Now, I start at right by pi, so this is where I start from. So some students just draw points right there. That's not what's going to happen. We need to be careful as to not only where we start, but what value at the starting point is going to be. Amelia, negative cosine was once again, the starting point was starting at pi, and it's going to be max, middle, or minimum. A -2. So you start from minimum, then you keep on alternating with I'm going to highlight nope, that's my fault. I'm going to highlight where all those values are going to come into play. So 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, that's going to be a maximum, and 0, keep on alternating the points. And then I'm going to connect the dots. A very good idea to draw the points out first and then connect everything afterwards, okay? All right, so we're going to be doing one last slide here, and I'm going to end on, yeah, I think this one looks okay. This one looks good. You don't
Mr.
have
Kim,
to, yes,
Can you please go back for a sec?
of course.
So in the number 19, the second example,
Yep.
since it's negative, wouldn't that mean that the line goes above the x-axis instead of below?
Are you talking about the negative here or
No. I'm talking about the one in front.
in the front? Like, you mean this thing?
Yeah.
Okay, that negative, all it does is it reflects it over the x-axis. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Like, so the graph is just transformed, just being flipped over. Now, we say x-axis, but what it really means is that reflected over the line of symmetry or the reflected over the midline. That's all it is. The middle line is at -1. But the highest and lowest that it goes up to, because of the amplitude being only 1, it only goes up to 0 and it only goes down to -2. So there's no point in time in which this graph is going to go above the x-axis.
Okay, thank you. I see.
Yep. All right, so the last one here I'm going to show you is this. Okay, you don't have to draw the table out. Okay, I don't think that's necessary. And then I'm going to just draw this one big wave. I just want you to think about the graph transformations here. Okay, you guys can all see what that is.
That's data.
That's data.
Is that the same thing as the x?
That's the same thing as saying x. So -2 cosine of x plus pi over 6 minus 1. You guys can do it that way. Yes, you can rewrite it as x. They mean the same thing. I'm going to tell you guys this right now. Please don't do this. Don't cut that in half. Like, you guys know the increments are going to be pi over 2, pi, yada, yada, yada. If you do that, if you cut this in half, that's pi over 4. I want pi over 6. So think about how I can change the little small increment so that I get a nice pi over 6. If you take it into fourths, then it's going to be pi over 8, right? I think I heard one of you guys say it. For those of us struggling here, what do we divide this up by? How many sections? 3. Why? Because that means this will be pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, and this right here will be 3 pi over 6, which technically is the same thing. This 3 pi over 6 technically means the same thing as pi over 2. So instead of cutting into halves each time, cut every single one of these into a piece, like in a 3 pieces instead. And then now we can see, oh, I have to move left by pi over 6, and then now we can all see where we can start from. Okay, but we need to divide every single one of these into an increment of 3s this time. Then once wherever you start, we essentially divided this pi over 2 increments into 3 pieces. So the next point, whether it's going to be max, mid, or min, it moves after 3 increments after your starting point. So you move 3 to the right, and then you plot your point. Move 3 units to the right, and then you plot your next point, and then keep on going back and forth. Yes. Yeah, what's up? Oh, okay. Yeah. All right, so for those of you, just because of time, I'm just going to share you guys with the answer. The pi over 6, I need to start at minimum because it's being negative cosine. Every 3 increments after, so there at 2 pi over 6, that's where the minimum is going to occur. Every 3 increments, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and then you go to max, middle, minimum. Then you keep on doing that over and over again. So then that would be max, middle, and then minimum. So this is the graph. That you guys will be able to get. So if you get pi over 6, all I want you first to understand is divide every pi over 2 increments into pieces of 3. And then draw the points from there. Okay? Have a wonderful day.
Mr. Kim,
Thank you. Yes, Sam.
in that graph, where's the starting point?
The starting point is at negative pi over 6, which is right here.
Why is it so low?
Because it starts at minimum.
Okay, so the -2 would just mean that it starts at the bottom.
Not the -2, the negative cosine. The negative with the cosine, that determines that I start at the minimum.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yep.